welcome to another episode of the Pitcher Perfect podcast. As you can see, Holly and I are together. We are in Colorado filming this episode for you guys. Figured we'd do a 2-for-1 as opposed to separate rooms talking to you today. Obviously, we are in Colorado seeing a lot of different performances, the Colorado air, a lot of home runs.
Yep.
We've been talking about how you prevent those, how you can kind of be better as a pitcher to limit those as much as it is hard out here in Colorado. But we're going to start off today kind of talking about something we mentioned in our previous podcast episodes, but that we think is really important, and that is repeatability. And I know personally that's something I worked really hard at, especially when I was young. It wasn't just throwing, but was being able to repeat pitches both with the movement, with the speed, and the spot that you want to hit. And so I think we're going to talk about that today, why it's important. And then I think the most important piece, how can you train that? How can you train repeatability where you get in a game and you see a swing and miss and you're able to throw that same pitch?
Yeah, I like to use the verbiage just like matching spots. Okay. So yeah, you hit a good spot on a hitter and being able to go there again, and not just having the it all really goes back to command, like what we've been talking about, command, consistency, and giving your pitch caller, your catcher, your coach the confidence in you that you can continue to thread a spot if that's what's working for you, and continuing to really command the zone. I think a big part of it is commanding the zone. And again, something else we touched on is when you're able to do that, when you have that repeatability, how that feeds into the dynamic with the umpire too.
Yes.
And the umpire's ability to really get into a rhythm. It is between you, the catcher, the pitch caller, and the umpire. You guys are all working together, and that repeatability really kind of aligns and brings that piece together. That's that last piece I think a lot of people don't talk about or think about, but giving repeatability to the umpire, letting him know that you're putting the ball where you want to put it, and you're able to consistently hit certain spots. It's going to bring them into the game and really into that dynamic and that battery.
Well, yeah, and we've talked about that before too with the umpire, is that, if you're throwing all over the zone, then that one that's close, the umpire is less likely to call because you just haven't been, as you said, commanding the zone or pounding the zone with good pitches. And you want that borderline one called, but you have to prove that you can throw strikes first. If you are throwing all over, an umpire kind of gets in a rhythm too of like, oh, this ball's going to miss. Oh, that's close, but they don't give you the call. And then you're sitting there thinking, oh, well, that was close enough to be a strike. Yeah. Well, if you haven't thrown strikes, it kind of lulls the umpire too. And that's a real thing. It's a real thing at all levels. I've seen it in college even. Like, if you don't throw strikes, they're not just going to all of a sudden give you one. So you have to be able to show that you can command the zone before the ump starts I shouldn't say the ump starts giving it to you, but before you can start to stretch the zone and see how far out he'll go, you have to establish his zone first. But I think repeatability, or I like the matching spots verbiage, is so important because as a pitcher, if you aren't sure where your pitch is going, how are you having confidence in it, right? As a pitch caller, I like it because if we see a kid swing and miss, most of the time, at some point in the at-bat, we will go back to that spot because they've shown us that there's a hole there. As pitch callers, at least you and I, we notice when someone, maybe they swing and miss and they just miss, or they straight back hard, so we know, okay, they kind of were on that. Maybe we aren't going back to that spot, or if we are, we're stretching it a little bit. But the repeatability allows you to have the feel that I feel like you need to control an at-bat. A lot of times when I see pitchers that can't repeat, I feel like they don't have the feel of their body and of what that pitch really feels like. There are times, I hate to say it, but in pro ball when I played, there were times out of the hand that I'm yelling yes, or I'm like, that's it. Even in my bullpens, I talk to myself in my bullpen. So there are times in the bullpen I throw because I feel that everything clicked and the pitch did exactly what I wanted it to, and then we do it again. And it's like you get excited about having that feel. And I think that's something as young pitchers that we don't preach enough, is getting the feel and the mechanics to being able to throw a pitch multiple times in a row. Before we get into how to train that, from your perspective, not how important, but how many pitchers do you see that can do the repeatability? And then, without giving away the drills or the setups on how we can practice it, how do you get them to think about repeating their pitches?
Well, in game, I would say visualizing is a big thing. Visualizing the spot that you're trying to hit and really understanding where you're trying to put the ball. So when you step on the mound, it's not just getting the sign and then just going and rushing. I was on a call last week with PitchCom about how some of those devices can really help with it doesn't take as long to get the pitch. So, you know, when you're using the cards and stuff like that, and pitchers, their minds are kind of scatterbrained and they're trying to find what the pitch is, or they're waiting. What that eliminates when you are using some kind of pitch calling device is you get the pitch right away. Now you have the time to take a deep breath, visualize the spot you're trying to hit, and visualize your body doing it. And I think that that's a big piece if we're talking about in-game, is making sure that you have the time, that you're not rushed, and that you see the spot in your mind and you're just continuing to execute that same spot.
Yeah. I think visualization is huge, and we haven't talked about that a whole lot yet on this podcast, but it's another whole topic we can get into. But my early stint with the national team, I can't remember if it was I think it was the 04 quad. We worked with a sports psychologist on and off until the last year, and then he was with us all the time. At some point, I got into a conversation with him, and when things were struggling, he's like, well, do you visualize? And I was like, well, I mean, I look at my spot and I know where I want it to go. And I got in this routine of, as soon as the pitch got called in, and it's quick, it's not taking, a whole minute to be like, okay, I'm throwing. No, I visualize, if I'm, let's say, drop outside, I visualize it going, and then it coming back at me. So I see the path there and the path on the way back. And then I got on the mountain, like, let's go. And I think the visualization piece is huge, especially because if you can see, if in your head you can see what you want the pitch to do, you've probably done it at some point in time. Obviously, I like curveballs. I keep doing the curveball hand motion.
Well, that is your right hand.
This is my right hand. So I think the visualization piece of being able to repeat a pitch is huge.
Something that you said about was seeing it go to the catcher, but also see it coming back to your hand. Is that something that the sports psychologist suggested, or just something that was playing in your mind?
No, that's something he suggested, to being able to see the pitch path and like how I want it to break. And so I want it to break to this spot, and then I want to see it coming back to my hand. Because I think sometimes in our mind, we visualize a break that's probably bigger than what it really is. But I caught myself when it was coming back to me, I saw a more true break than like this great, 8-9 inch sweeping ball. And then when it comes back, you're like, oh wait, it's got to come back to my hand, where there is this straight path before it cuts out.
That's interesting.
And I think it's knowing your break though too. So like, I know in college, my drop into righties had a tail in. So if I needed a ball, I would make sure I visualized the tail in and not just the straight down. And so I think it's knowing your pitches, but at the same time, when you've thrown one, okay, I just saw what I threw. Let me visualize that again, both forward and backwards. And I don't know, the backwards piece just was like, it was like a light bulb clicked on in my head.
That's interesting. I've never heard of that. And that's actually a really, really good point. I think that the thing about like visualization and kind of these cues, especially what you're talking about right now, these are things that pitchers can implement now. This is not just, we're obviously going to go into bullpens, and that's going to, you got to build up to that and you got to work that in. But like, these are pieces that pitchers, if you're listening to this and then you have a game later today, like, you can start this now, and you can start in the bullpen, obviously pre-game, because we can't expect ourselves to do anything in a game that we're not preparing ourselves for. So there's obviously that preparation piece, but just when you're warming up, when you're taking your 5-pitch warm-ups, we talked about that last time, versus walkthroughs where you're just like, oh yeah, I'm going to pump the ball in there and feel like I'm throwing 70 miles per hour and the first 3 go over the catcher's head. But getting onto the mound and visualizing the pitch, visualizing the batter, and actually having purposeful 5-pitch, like in between inning warm-ups, I think is a big piece as well.
No, it is. And I think maybe we just found a new topic to go on to. It's visualization. Yeah. It can be huge, and it can be implemented at any time and every time. I mean, we'll talk about it. We'll expand on it in another episode, but you can use it at night before a game. You can use it in the car on the way to the field. Like you said, warm up beforehand, like warm ups before the inning. It's always something that helps. But with that, talking about it being in the bullpen, obviously with repeatability, I think one of the things, and I've, again, mentioned it a couple times in different podcasts with how we work, and I say you have to be consistent. So if you're younger, it's like 5 pitches. Yeah. So, our youngsters take 5 pitches. How many out of 5 can you hit, right? 3 is 60%, 4 is 80%. So we're aiming for 3 or 4. Okay. If you start off at 2, great, but let's not move on until we're hitting 3 and 4 consistently, and even 5 sometimes. And it's literally not just saying, hey, throw. My boss Scott Smith likes to say some of our girls throw in an area and some throw on a spot. And obviously with the range, you have the rings. So, but your spot needs to be pretty much the size of a ball or smaller that you're trying to hit. It's not a box. Like, I love the 9 holes, don't get me wrong, but you can throw the top of the box and the bottom of the box, and one's a strike, one's one's not, right?
Yeah.
So you're trying to find, and I used to tell my girls, especially when I was in college, when we used the 9-hole, we're like aiming at the string, because the string in the 9-hole was like about knee height. And so it's like, we want there or right below, like the top of the ball should be hitting the string. That's where we're trying to throw. When I was in college, actually, for the 04 team, I had to withdraw from school. So I couldn't practice with the team. I was lucky if the managers, our timing schedules matched up that they could be at the bullpen with me. But we didn't have 9 holes at this point in time. So we just had the catch nets, right? And everybody tied the strings to drop them down. And I would literally try to find like a crosshair of the boxes that were like this big and be like, okay, I'm aiming for that box right there. And I mean, the box was no bigger than, that big. And so the smaller you can make your spot, I think that you're focusing on, the more precise you can start to get with your locations. But I would do sets of 5 or sets of 10. Obviously, the older I get, more sets of 10. How many can we hit? I would also do sets like drop, rise, curve, off speed, whatever, like mix 2 pitches, but the set could not be completed unless I hit both.
So that's something I was going to ask you too. When you threw your bullpens, or when pitchers are throwing their bullpens, say this is during the week, do they have to be throwing every single pitch, or can they say, okay, Monday I'm going to work on these 2 pitches and that's all I'm going to focus on, and then Tuesday I'm going to work my east to west pitches or whatever? Because I think for me, I personally feel like sometimes it's better, obviously quality over or quantity. What am I trying to say? Quality over quantity. But like when you are working spots, sometimes to me it's better that let's just pick our bread and butter and our changeup today, and then work on like really mastering those, and then tomorrow we can work on something else. Because I think to me sometimes pitchers they have to go through all 5 or 6 of, and we've talked about not needing that many pitches, but let's be honest, a lot of pitchers do. So they're going through 5 or 6 pitches every bullpen. So how many times are you actually hitting, or how many sets are you actually throwing of each pitch if you are working that many pitches in a bullpen?
No, I think that's a good point. And like another topic for us is creating bullpens and like how to put those together to best enhance your weaknesses and your strengths. You don't have to throw every pitch in every bullpen. There are times that, especially to be honest, when I was coming back from retirement, like there were days my husband was like, okay, today, when I was first getting back into today's fastballs and draw balls, and that's it. And then it was like, okay, today's gonna be fastballs and rise balls. But even in college, there were days where it's like, okay, today's gonna be a curveball day because we're gonna work on spotting it into right-handed hitters, but you're gonna pair it with a drop. And I'd be like, okay, but my rise. No, you don't need to throw your rise today. Just because you don't throw your pitch for one day does not mean you're losing your pitch.
Right.
Now you alternate. So like, if I go curve drop, then the next day I get to go rise and backdoor, or rise and off speed or whatever. So you only don't throw a pitch for one day, but obviously if it's pre-game day, no, I'm going to warm up.
Yeah,
but there are times where if you want to really work on being able to be consistent and repeat pitches, then yes, you have to be able to throw just those pitches. And I think the other piece too is you can also separate pitches within your bullpen. Mm-hmm. I also see pitchers that are like, oh, I'm going to warm up everything. It's like, okay, but we're just going to work drop and change first. So why don't we warm up those 2, work our repeatability, then we can go to the next 2 and warm them up again. Instead of warming up all 5 or 6, and then it's like, no, just warm up those 2, then we can work. Now everything's warm and we can mix it 4 pitches if we want. Right. I kind of call that block working, like block workouts. Block this pitch or these 2 pitches, and then go from there. But I think a lot of times, like you said, we try to do too much all the time. Mm-hmm. And you're not going to be able to repeat, now let's say rise balls in, because we were just talking about that pre-recording. So if I want to work rise balls in, I don't always need to throw my drop and my change mixing in with that, right? Mm-hmm. Like, let's throw rise balls in and let's see the spin, the speed, and the location be what we want it to be. Repeat that, again, sets of 5, sets of 10, whatever it is. Then, after I've done that a good enough amount of times, and I would say 20, 30 pitches, and you're hitting a good high percentage. Now I'm going to go, okay, my goal is my rise ball in, but I am going to mix it with a drop so I can work on my body position or something like that. Or, an opposite pitch. Not a very similar pitch, but an opposite pitch. So that way my goal is repeatability of the rise, but now I'm introducing something different that looks like I'm mixing and is training my brain and my body to make those adjustments.
Now, would you say if we were to rank like the importance of repeatability within your pitches, what's the number 1 pitch that a pitcher needs to make sure that she's got repeatability on?
Oh.
And not necessarily pitch type. Would you say it's going to be like her strikeout pitch, or more so like get a strike?
No, I think it's your get a strike pitch.
Yeah.
It's your what can you throw that anytime that a coach needs a strike that you can throw it and get a called strike. Because let's not, like, some people are like, oh, well, my rise ball's really, you get a lot of swing and misses, but if a team notices that you're just a rise ball pitcher, like, you have to be able to throw something for a called strike. And guilty as charged, I was a rise ball pitcher prior to college primarily, but I knew how to throw, we called it a low rise, it didn't rise. It was a fastball. But I knew how to cut it and throw it on the outer half for when I needed a strike. And so whenever, we got 2-0 or 2-1, and I would just throw that pitch for a strike, and then we're back in the game, and now I can expand the zone if I need to.
I think that what I've seen a lot with pitchers that do have kind of elite movement, when they're moving up to ins, obviously at the younger levels, you're going to get people, the chase rate's a little bit higher. At the upper levels, 18s, and then moving into college, you're going to have some more disciplined hitters that we talk about here have a plan. They obviously know what your strikeout pitch is. So there's a lot of pitchers that sometimes feel like, well, I don't need to really throw the ball for a strike or master those repeatability strike pitches because, I'm going to go to my rise ball or my chase, out of the zone 2-strike pitches. And then all of a sudden people aren't swinging at it. And they don't really have any repeatability with something else to get themselves to 2 strikes and then have to force the batter to chase that pitch. So they're continuing to fall behind in the count. And I think that's really good, especially for you elite pitchers out there, to know that you got to be able to pair that nasty movement stuff with something you can get a strike and work ahead with, so that you're forcing batters to chase your stuff later in the count. Because as you get older, probably not going to be chasing as much out of the zone early on in the count.
Well, that, and two, depending on how deep in a game a pitcher goes, like if you are constantly getting swing and miss in the first 2 innings on something up, if a good hitting team applies a plan, now with 2 strikes, they're not chasing them. Mm-hmm. But they're looking to lay off of it. So their eyes are still looking up, right? But then you freeze them with something you can throw for a strike. And again, this is where I disagree with all 0-2 and 1-2 pitches always have to be way out of the zone. They shouldn't be fat and hittable. But if I have repeatability and I can throw, let's say, a curveball in the outer half and split the corner, and I can repeat that over. Well, if they're looking up with 2 strikes and all of a sudden I throw that, that's where you get your looking strikeouts.
Yeah, so that would be like a term that we use sometimes, like pitching backwards. Yeah, so you're rather than working in the zone and then expanding out, you're expanding out and then freezing them in the zone with 2 strikes, because let's be honest, there's so many hitters expect you to go out of the zone on 0-2, and then they're not ready for that 0-2 pitch. 2, they're obviously looking to protect, but they're not really expecting something in the zone.
Right, and then they freeze. And so I think you having repeatability of pitches allows you to play with the counts, but also allow your pitch caller to know that there's something that they can rely on when they need a strike. I obviously would prefer we have something on both sides of the plate that we can repeat, and that we can then, you repeat, but then you can also expand it a little bit. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how bullpens, I kind of went through that, and then you can explain, obviously you work in the range weekly and more hands-on in a lesson type atmosphere than I am these days. But both myself and then when I college coached, we had this kind of rule of when we were warming up and we threw a good one, we tried to throw 3 in a row. Then when you got to 3, you tried to throw 5. If you got to 5, great, now you can move on to your next pitch. If we didn't get to 5 but we got to 4, we could still move on. Because 3 was the goal, and it was like, how far can we get? And I actually implemented that in Randy Rupp when I was at Texas State. She was our 2-time All-American. We implemented that in her pregame warm-up. She did not move on from her backdoor curve till she hit 3 in a good spot. Then she went to curve and she hit 3 in a good spot. And there were some days that it was 3 right out the gate. And she was like, ooh, I'm feeling good. And I'm like, great. If you want to throw more than 3, feel free. But the goal is to throw 3 in a row so our body is doing what we want it to do. I see a lot of pitchers in your warm-up and bullpens both. Well, warm-up for your bullpen and then warm-up pregame. That will be like, okay, I'm going to throw curveballs. And they throw 5, and all 5 are in a different spot. And they're like, okay, now I'm going to go to screwball. And I'm like, wait a minute. Why did we move on from curves if none of them were similar? Right? Why are we moving on from something if we don't have control of it today? And I think that's the first piece in your bullpens and your pregame warm-ups is make sure you are repeating pitches. I say minimum 3 times in a row. If you can't do it 3 times in a row, that's 2 out of 3 is 66%, right? So that's not even, if we're saying we're doing sets of 5, 3 is minimum. And so if you want to do a set of 5 and you hit 3 out of 5 until you can get 3 in a row, I could go there. I can give leeway there. But you should be able to throw 3 solid, similar pitches, and not similar by 6 inches. Similar meaning micro inches. I don't know if that's not even a word. And then from there, going into your bullpen. So I think that's where it starts, is being able to repeat in your warm up. And then I mentioned the sets of 5 and sets of 10, but the other piece I like to do with my pitchers is we go 3 strikes on, like if we're going curveball, 3 strikes, 3 ball off the plate, back to 3 strikes, then ball off the plate, and then if we need to work 2 balls off the plate, we do. But we do back and forth of those, so that way they can control their body and say, okay, I know where my hand goes on a strike, I know where I go on a ball, now I know where I go when I really need to extend. Because some pitchers can extend way off just with their hands, some will lean a little bit. Like it's different per pitcher, but if you just go one way and never go back, you're not teaching yourself how to go from throwing a ball back to throwing a strike. And that's where I think a lot of pitchers get in trouble in the game, is like, we can stair step out, but we can't stair step back. And if we can't stair step back, how do we get the strike called? So we can go curveball, strike 1, or even drop ball. Let's go to drop balls. Drop ball, strike 1 in the zone. I go down mid shin, she doesn't swing. Okay, I show an inside pitch, we get a foul ball. I still, as a pitch caller, think, okay, we can get her down and out. But now we're going to go back to the one in the zone because she didn't swing at it, and it didn't look like she was even wanting outside because she didn't even chase the one that was a little bit lower. So it's both working vertical and horizontal and being able to repeat strikes to balls back to the repeatable strike.
You touched on a pitch, the drop ball for a strike. Can we segue for 1 second and just talk about how for all our pitchers out there, I would say this is a PSA because I have heard it. You can tell me if I'm wrong. Maybe you've probably heard it, but we can throw drop balls for called strikes.
Oh, 100%.
Because I can't tell you how many pitchers are like, when we're working, okay, you're going to throw your drop ball. Like you said, we do that at the range. We're going to throw it because we use the targets. We're going to throw our drop ball for a strike at, like bottom of the zone, knees-ish or whatever, and then we're going to work it down. And pitchers like, how do you throw a drop ball for a strike? You can throw it for a strike.
Yes. Don't get me wrong, it's fun to see it dip out of zone, it's fun to see a hitter wave over it, but if you prove you can throw it for a strike, you're more likely to get the chases down in the zone. And a downspin pitch in the zone is honestly your best friend. It takes a lot for a hitter to get through a true good downspin in the zone. That's where you're trying to get the ground balls and you're trying to let your defense work.
Especially in Colorado.
Yes, yes. Drop balls in Colorado are a girl's best friend. But the drop ball in the zone sets up everything, to be honest. And I think you're right, too many people want to see it always moving down out of the zone, but like a ground ball and a drop ball in the zone is not a bad pitch.
Yeah, I think that the thing is, anything that you spot at the bottom part of the zone, especially if it's got downward break on it, that's a plus. But anything that you're working at the bottom of the zone, like a couple years ago we had a pitcher, CC Silora, she's a drop ball pitcher, but her goal, it wasn't, okay, we're going to try and get X amount of strikeouts. It wasn't necessarily the result in that way, but it's like, let's try and get roll up 15 ground balls per game. I don't care if they're swinging and missing or whatever. We're in Colorado. A ball in the ground's not going out of the park. So let's try to just roll up ground balls. And what that means is basically just working bottom of the zone. And whether or not you've got great elite plus down break on a drop ball, or you've got an average drop that's just put it at the bottom of the zone. And it's like ground balls are, it's a pitcher, especially in Colorado with this altitude. It's not, there's so many, everybody talks about Colorado. I hate pitching in Colorado, the altitude, the ball flies. Well, guess what's not going out of the park? A ground ball.
No, well, and then go so far, look at Mac Morgan. Started her career at ASU, finished at Texas this last year. But she pitched some of the best games in the World Series. 2 years ago against Florida, this past year against Tennessee. And all she throws is a drop ball. She may show me a high pitch occasionally or expand the zone, but she literally pounds the zone at the knees. Then she'll try to either go down or out. She's not trying to do too much and do both. And she will literally, some of her best games, I think they said her career high or season high maybe was 4 or 5 strikeouts, because she doesn't care. If she gets the swing and miss, yeah, she's pumped up. But she loves feeding her defense because she's like, I know I throw it hard enough and I have downspin that my defense is just going to work behind you. Yeah. Now that's the key. Your defense does have to work behind you. And sometimes as a drop ball pitcher, if your defense is having a terrible day, yes, you may come out of the game. And that's no offense. And any good coach would tell you it's not your fault. If you're rolling ground balls they should be making plays on, then that it is what it is. But literally a pitcher who 4 years of college and she threw drop balls.
I think also with the expansion of all these facilities that are using turf now, for all our pitch coaches,
there's a lot more not bad bounces on turf.
Yeah, for pitch callers out there, for pitchers, use your down stuff. Ground balls on turf is like you're getting like true ground balls, true hops, and roll up those ground balls if you're playing on turf fields.
Yeah, but to that point, let's add that to repeatability, is being able to say, okay, I can throw my drop ball for a strike on the outer half. I can be able to throw my drop ball for a strike on the inner half. Now I can be able to take it down in what I call like the 0-1-1 count. Like if they were swinging, I'm going to go a little bit lower than the knee. And then I have my 0-2 where I'm going to throw it right over their shoe tops if it's a right-handed hitter inside. Or if I know they're aggressive, I'm going to know that I can short hop it and my catcher's going to bounce it or be able to block it. But it's the repeatability in the zone, like you said, throw it in the zone to then get the chase.
Right.
Because if you don't prove you can throw it in the zone at some point, as soon as they see it down and out, same thing as like an up and in. They're going to just be looking to take it because you haven't proven that you can actually throw it for a strike.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. That it's the same. Yeah, same goes for an up pitch, a rise ball pitcher who anything that starts here, you already know is going to be a ball. Yeah. People aren't going to swing. So like if it's starting at the letters, it's not going to stay there. So even being able to throw a rise ball for a strike, you know, something a little bit lower, like a lower rise or whatever. But that repeatability definitely comes into play, that you've got control and you're putting the ball in spots with intention.
Yeah, well, it's the attention. I think the other piece of a bullpen that I like is, I mentioned earlier, the sets. And I will do it two ways. One pitch will be our repeatability pitch. So we're trying to execute a rise ball inside at a certain spot, but we're mixing it with something else.
Yeah.
And then the other thing I'll do, and I started doing this at Texas State when I was when I was coaching college, is I gave them two pitches and they had to hit their spots. But let's say they did it 3 times and they hit their rise ball spot, but they had to keep doing the same set, aiming for those spots until they hit. So they didn't get to just quit throwing the rise ball and now go to the drop ball. So we were trying to work on that exact spot, and it was like some pitchers would hit it, you know, all three. They do 3 or 4 sets and they would knock it out. And I had one pitcher who was like, man, this really makes me focus because I'm good at this one. So I knock it out right away. But then she's like, it's trying to make me actually focus on hitting my weaker pitch first. Yeah. So I'm not sitting here and throwing 8 sets when really I could have narrowed this down in like 5 and been able to execute my spots. So I think making sure it's not just, hey, I'm throwing a rise and a drop. I'm throwing a rise to a spot and I'm throwing a drop to a spot. And I have to repeat those spots until I hit 3 of each or 4 of each or whatever it is. And it's not necessarily in the same set, but you're going to keep trying to hit spots. And I make them keep count too. So even though they hit 3 of 1 and like technically that's checked off, if they have to throw 4 more sets, how many did you hit of your great pitch in those next 4? Because we want to make sure that every pitch, and I think that's a whole nother thing, every pitch has an intent and a purpose.
Yeah. And we've talked about like purposeful bullpens. Where do you balance a purposeful pregame warm-up versus a feel-good? Because we want to feel good going into the game, obviously. So I think a lot of pitchers are just throwing kind of feel-goods and not always pregame purpose. Like, where do you balance the two, or what would you place more importance on? Is it making sure really that they're... Because look, we all know you can have a bad warm-up and still have a good game. It doesn't mean you're going to have a bad game if you have a tough warm-up. And I also, you know, I hate... There's a lot of pitchers that it's like they'll stay in the bullpen and warm up way too long if they're not feeling good, and how many pitches are they wasting, and you know, they're like one more, I'm not feeling good yet. And it's like, so you got to kind of balance the two. But yeah, like I said, so my question would be, where do you place more importance, a feel good pregame or a really intentional, purposeful pregame?
Well, I think my question to the pitcher was, why can't those be one and the same?
Yeah,
like we should be able to be intentful and still feel good, right? Yeah, and you can also be intentful and not feel good, but then there was never going to be a feel good warm up on that day. And as you said, I've had some of my worst bullpens have turned into great games. I remember specifically there was one warm up in college that it was awful. Like I was like, here we go, and then we end up throwing a no hitter because by the time we get out there, I don't know, either I threw all the bad ones or my mind shifted focus, and all of a sudden, you know, it's a different ball game once you get on the field. So your warm up is to get your body and your mind primed, which sometimes is going to feel good and sometimes isn't. But if you can differentiate that as soon as you step through the white line, like, yes, I'm warm, but that doesn't have to be taken into the game with you.
Yeah.
But I think your warm-up, for me, it's one and the same. Because if I feel good, I have intent. If I feel good, I'm throwing the pitches where I want to throw them. Which is where, when we talked about throwing like 3 in a row, should be. You should start to feel good because you hit 3 spots in a row, but at the same time, you have the intent to throw 3 spots. If feel good to a pitcher means I'm just out there throwing and I have no care in the world where it goes and I'm just going to throw 5 pitches and move on, then I'm going to assume in game, we're trying to do the same thing. We're not having a focus. When I've talked about it, the 5 pitches before an inning. If you're just chucking them wherever, how are you all of a sudden going to dial in? You can't just flip a switch and dial in.
Yeah.
So where are you dialing in? You should dial in your warm up. And don't get me wrong, there is part of the beginning where, yes, do your K drills and just spin it, feel good. Do your first couple walkthroughs, feel good. Your first 2 or 3 pitches, like let your mechanics flow and feel it, but then dial into, I need to hit a spot. I need to see this. I need to feel the spin off my fingers. Okay, I hit 3 of those. Let me go to the next one. I think there should always be intent in a pregame warm up.
So I would go back to that and say for our pitchers out there to make sure, because I think pitchers are very routine oriented, so make sure that your pregame routine integrates purpose within it so that you're able to feel good because you're going through your normal routine, but your normal routine has elements of purpose and intent within it. So now you're doing what you normally do, but what you normally do has intent and purpose.
Correct. I think repeatability comes with the intent of trying to hit a spot and get the spin. But I do think before we sign off on this topic is like repeatability includes your speed, your spin, and your location. So it's hitting a location, but it's also with the same break, with the same speed. And I know, pretty sure it was Melissa Lombardi spoke at a pitching convention, and she was talking about their block part of their bullpen plus their variable part of their bullpen, and she says she makes them throw, and it was repeatability, like 5 or 6 in a row or something. They have a goal that they have to hit, but she asks them on a 1 to 10 scale to rank their spin, their speed, and their location, and all 3 of those are different. She's like, but if they're repeating the pitch for 5 or 6 pitches, those should all be the same.
Yeah.
And she's like, obviously, if one is a 5 and one is a 6, as far as what they're ranking the speed to be, she goes, then it's not wrong. But if they felt like one speed was an 8 and one was a 5, we didn't repeat the pitch. And so, obviously there's some technology that allows you to measure that itself. But I also think a pitcher having feel of when they throw a good pitch, spin, speed, and location-wise, they can keep repeating that. But I think that's another way is have your pitcher kind of analyze and tell you, okay, in these 3 areas or 2 areas even. I mean, go location and spin.
Yeah.
Obviously, at younger ages, the speed doesn't change as much drastically sometimes. So just go spin and location. How'd you feel? And as a catcher and a pitching coach, you can see if it moves and you can talk to them about it. But repeatability, huge one for a pitcher. I mean, and again, we can go in, I think we've found like 5 different offshoot topics in this conversation alone, but your confidence is going to come from your ability to repeat pitches. Your ability to repeat pitches is going to allow you to set up hitters and get hitters out. So therefore our confidence moves even more or increases even more. And then once we have that confidence, then we really are starting to really control an at-bat and control the zone. And that in and of itself ends up being the goal of pitching, quality pitches to control an at-bat and control the zone. Well, thank you guys for another episode of the Pitcher Perfect podcast. As you heard, we will be coming to you with a variety of other topics in the next couple weeks, but we hope you enjoy this one. Work on repeating your pitches. If there are any questions, you guys can always drop us a DM on our Instagram. You can always email us. We will get to any questions, and we would love to help you guys out, especially bullpens, to work on repeatability. Such an important skill for a pitcher is to be able to repeat that pitch and then set up others. And as always, like, subscribe, share, let your friends know that Pitcher Perfect podcast is out here, and we will be coming to you with another episode soon.
Bye from our fireside chat.